Mm-hmm.
influence in some way?
Yes. So the question is, what is the connection between, especially this lower self, the one that prompts evil, and between Satan or Iblis from the Islamic perspective? So that's an important question. Even absent the devil, the human being is created in such a way that they have to overcome the negative energy that is part of them as well. And actually, the word that is used is that in the Quran is that God showed the path for its vice and showed the path for its let's say its purity or its goodness or its piety. And so both are there, and so that is something that the human being has to overcome. So shaitan, he works on that aspect to the person. So he works on, let's say a person, let's see, let me pick on someone. I don't know some of the names. Let's say, for example, Micah, he wouldn't do this, but let's say Brother Micah punched me in the face, right? And then, please don't punch me in the face. And then I get so mad. That's a part of me as a human being to get mad. But now for it to be, oh, you're going to let him do that to you, and you need to like teach him a lesson, punch him 10 times in the face, right? So now that is a coupling between what's an inner natural thing, but also from an outer whisperer, which we could call the devil also the whisperer, right? So so then a person needs to be able to overcome one's evil promptings and surrender himself to what would God want to be done in a particular situation. That's sort of the constant pursuit of the Muslim, is to try to understand, okay, what is God's will, not just what I must do, but what ought I do, what should I do, and trying to discover that through the revelation of the Quran and through the example of Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him. This last bullet here, of course, the human being is not just the soul, but is also mind, is also body. And so it is saying that that person, in their mind, they understand and they come to the realization that God is only one and He's the only one to be worshipped. And in their body, when they pray, they actually exhibit that, and it's manifested in the bowing, in the prostration. And then, of course, at the level of the soul, that is where the constant work takes place to be really everything coming into its full essence as well. So any questions before I go to the next slide? Yes, over here.
Just on Satan, how did Satan become Satan?
Yes. That's one of my favorite stories to tell the kids, because then I get to act out a lot of different parts and stuff. But to answer the question, it's a very interesting story, because he actually was very close to God at first as a jinn. So jinn can choose, right? Humans can choose. He was making the choices, taking the actions, to the point where he had reached to the level where he could be in the presence of the angels. This is why sometimes there's confusion about whether he's an angel or not. He was actually in the presence of the angels, in the company of the angels. And so whenever a person is rising in their devotion or their rank with God, they will be tested to a greater degree. And the test is to ascertain their genuineness, that this is really about God and not about something else. That they're really saying that there is none to be worshipped except the one God. So basically, Iblis, or the devil, his test was Adam. That's why he hates the human being so much. So Adam, the test with him was he needed to bow to Adam out of respect, because Adam had capacity for knowledge and other things that which God had created for him, given to him. And so when Allah commanded the angels to bow, they all bowed down except for Iblis. And he refused to bow. And so Allah said to him, why didn't you bow to what I've created with my own hands? He said, which is a dangerous thing, he said, I am better than him. This is the antithesis of Islam. It's the antithesis of surrender. It's outright rebellion, right, to God. He said, It said, I am better than him. This is why a lot of times Muslims say that things like racism and nationalism in excess, right? That this is something that comes from the devil, this idea of superiority and putting someone down. So he said, I am better than him. You created me from fire, and you created him from clay. Right? So, of course, once he failed the test, and then he is, he's sent down. Adam's test was different. His first test was the test of desire, and he failed that test, but then he repented to God. But that's another story that's going to come up in the courses or in the classes as we go along. But that's a good question. Any other questions before we go to the next slide here? Yes? Okay, so the jinn is just another creature. And they were actually created before the human beings. They have families. They're male and female. Angels do not have male, female. They don't have families, etc. There are jinn which are good. There are jinn which are evil. Right? So their role is just to, the same as human beings, is to worship the one God. Now, wherever there's interaction between human and jinn, this is where usually you get into things like sorcery and witchcraft and voodoo type. A lot of that has to do with jinn. It's something, again, that it's a reality, but as a Muslim, as a human Muslim, because there are jinn Muslim, human Muslim, they're really not supposed to go into that type of world because it can lead to doing things which may be displeasing to Allah, right? So, but when you go to Muslim countries and so on, there's a lot of different jinn stories. I would say a lot of them are just made up to scare the kids, but actually the jinn are mentioned in the Quran and they're talked about in the Quran. Okay, so this is going to go into an interesting area. The question is, do they live among us? It sounds like the name of a scary movie. They're among us. Usually the jinn would be in their own kind of, they're usually like desolate areas. There might be some parallels between the things about ghosts and that kind of thing. In areas where there's not a lot of human beings, but there can be sometimes interaction between human and jinn. And of course, each human being, besides having angels which record good and bad deeds, angels that try to prompt one to good, there's also, each person has a jinn that tries to get them to do the evil as well. Because it's not like Iblis himself is running all around over the place. He has his followers who basically do those things. So his minions, so to speak, right? It sounds like something from a cartoon. The minions. Okay. So anyhow, so this word here, it's actually interesting. In Arabic, we said ashhadu. So a shahada is a testimony. It could have been I believe. But instead, the word that we use is I testify, which means it has to come through a person really, again, grasping not the essence of God, but grasping that He is, in fact, one, and He is the only one to be worshipped. So the sort of very common intellectual parable, and we also believe it was a real story for this, is about Abraham, peace be upon him, where it just didn't make sense. He saw his father and some other exegesis, they say it was his uncle, but in another whatever case, that he was making idols of wood and stone with his own hands, and then they would go and bow down to them, etc. So he challenged, or maybe that's not the right word, but he was just questioning. He asked his father, he said, why are you, bowing down something which you yourself have created with your own hands? It didn't make sense to him. It didn't make sense to him that this was the one who has created me. In fact, I've seen my Father who has created it. And people who still practice idolatry, there's a lot of different answers that give and about the spirit and not the form and all this. But, to Abraham, peace upon him, and of course, it's totally rejected in Islam. But to Abraham, peace upon him, it didn't make sense. So he said, okay, who is my Lord? He had an inner sense. He had this intuitive sense that there has to be one to be worshipped. And